Hello everybody, today we're going to be starting up the Infinite Jest video series again, and we are at the bottom of page 78. This isn't a brand new chapter, but it is where we left off. So this is April 2nd, year of the Depend Adult Undergarment. We're back with the Near Eastern Medical Attaché, and his wife has just come back home, and his wife sees the Near Eastern Medical Attaché in his special recliner, and she notes that he's looking rather pleased and entertained, and she can't help but look at what he's seeing, and so she turns her head and sees the TP viewer with the cartridge the Near Eastern Medical Attaché found in the mail. And that's where that section ends. So we'll follow up a little bit more on this scene towards the end of this video. But we're now in page 79, and we're going to be following a new character, Gerard Stitt. And he's important because he's the head coach and athletic director of the Einfield Tennis Academy, ETA. So keep in mind, this is where Hal and Oren went to their tennis academy. And Mario's the roommate of Hal, so he's also here. So Gerard Stitt was sought after by James and Cadenza, Hal, Mario, Oren's dad, because both of them have a background in mathematics. And it's kind of interesting to think that somebody with a background in mathematics would go on to be a tennis coach, but I guess that's kind of a reason why these two would end up liking each other. So they don't consider themselves technicians of the game, they consider themselves mathematicians. And so they have a very unique way of kind of approaching the game itself. So there's a lot of philosophy in this chapter, and it's all told by Gerard Stitt interacting with Mario and Cadenza. And that's kind of funny because Mario can't play tennis, so they don't have that kind of commonality between the two. But we know that Mario can't play tennis because he's visibly damaged. And Mario believes that because he is handicapped, visibly damaged, it makes him easier to talk to. He seems like less of a threat, and so people kind of, forget he's there and have kind of like an external monologue. And so we get a bit of an external monologue with Gerard Stitt. And he starts off by saying, talking about how efficiency is a myth. And it's a myth that is propagated throughout the United States. And he makes the point that really Americans are sold the idea that the shortest distance between 2 points is always a straight line. And that's true on paper, but the problem is that life isn't a straight line. And so he makes the point that Americans will always take the straight line approach, and it doesn't matter if there's something in the way, they'll just run right through it and hit whatever that thing is, that obstacle is, and just try to push through. And he brings up the very relevant point, which is this ideology of a straight line approach to personal happiness. So you are 1 point, you're the beginning, and the other point is happiness. And as Americans, we try to take the most efficient straight line approach to getting there. It doesn't matter if there's an obstacle in the way, we just get there. And so that obviously is important for what we have read, because say, for example, if it's you as the starting point and personal happiness, and you have life like a job and a career or family to watch out for, it doesn't matter. You just barrel through and get your personal happiness. And we've had a lot of examples of that, whether it's staying at home from work to smoke weed, eating too much to the point that you get sick. This kind of goes back to the addiction ideology throughout the book. And we learn quite a little bit about James and Cadenza. And keep in mind, he was the headmaster of Einfield Tennis Academy. And every tennis academy has a motto, and it defines the academy and their overall personal goals. And so, you can think of some pretty trite sayings, like one mentioned in here is that the man who knows his limitations has none. So there are some trite ones like that, but James and Cadenza had a Latin phrase that defined the Einfield Tennis Academy, and loosely translated, it came out to be, "They can kill you, but the legalities of eating you are quite a bit dicier." So that, it's unclear to me what exactly that means, but it's interesting because it seems like he knew that someone was trying to kill him. They can kill you, but there's an optimistic part of that message, which is, they can't eat you, which, I'm not sure what that means. Does that mean they can't, consume who you are as a person? Like, what you did will still outlast you? You continue living on despite the fact that they won by killing you? I'm not really sure. But we learn essentially three important things after this. And this is Gerard Stitt talking to Mario once again. So one was, and these are all three philosophical ideas. One is, there in mathematics can be an infinity between any two things. And that infinity can be present no matter how close the two things are. And this is important because in tennis, we're getting to the second philosophical point, but I'll bring in the second philosophical point to kind of group it in with this one. In tennis, the goal is not to beat the person on the other side of the net. The person you try to beat is yourself. So really, you're always fighting against yourself, trying to defeat yourself. And we know from Hal's earlier dream that he had a dream in which he couldn't actually understand the rules of the game. He didn't know where to hit the ball because he couldn't tell where the baselines were. And so that is an idea that he couldn't even see between himself and a second point because there was an infinity of things in between. And we know that in that particular idea, that what we think is that he was trying to defeat himself and more of a overcoming his current addiction with drugs ideology, not trying to get better at tennis. But so we have someone who's trying to get over their addiction, but they can't even approach getting over their addiction because they can't tell what the game is. There's an infinity between himself and the person he wants to be, which is kind of a drug-free person. And I also think that the idea that there can be an infinity between two things is a little bit relevant to Hal and his dad. We know they had a conversational problem, and I think that those two people, despite the fact that they were both in a nuclear family, there was kind of an infinity between them. Whether or not it was, kind of perceived infinity, or was there a lot kept between the two? It seems like that definitely one of those is the case. And then the third philosophy that Gerard Stitt brings up is that with his idea of tennis, is that one action, like hitting a tennis ball, you have an infinity of actions you can do. You could hit it high, you could hit it low, you could hit it hard, soft. There's an infinity of the actions you can do. And then from that infinity of actions, there's an infinity of responses. And so there's just the idea that tennis is about perverse expansion. And I think that's a little bit of a metaphor for this book, because you can summarize the plot in 2 sentences, but this book, which is over 900 pages long, is about perverse expansion. It's about more than just the straight line between one point and the other point. Of course, the first point being the start and the second point being the end. It's not about trying to be as efficient as possible. It's about trying to expand things out where, to understand the infinity of reactions that can happen. And so we get to the end of that section, and Mario is following along well, but he's asking a lot of the questions we would ask, which is, if you're constantly trying to defeat yourself in tennis or life, is that, what's the difference between tennis and suicide? Tennis, you try to defeat yourself, kill yourself. Suicide, you kill yourself. And so he has a lot of good questions at the end. So this is kind of meant to be not particularly satisfying philosophy, but just kind of things we hint at, some ideas to how it fits into a larger whole. Okay, so now we get to the section where we are following, in the year of the dependent adult undergarment, Tiny Yule. So this is a tiny elf-sized man, and he is currently leaving a detox center and going to the Einfield halfway house. So he's presumably be detoxed from alcohol, and he now needs to have state supervision to make sure that he doesn't relapse. And it's unclear really how he got to this detox center, besides the fact that he's an alcoholic, but his wife had changed the locks and would only talk to him through the little slit in the front door. So something was really wrong in his, nuclear family relationships. And he has this belief that there are mice and rats coming out of the power outlets in his room. And he takes his shoe and he's trying to hit these mice, and he tells the nurses, you need to fumigate this room, and there aren't any mice coming out of electrical outlets. So he has kind of his own inner demons to work through as he's detoxing. And something that's important that comes up is that he also has a roommate, and his roommate kind of gives him the screaming Mimes, the howling Fantods, and Tiny Yule just kind of is scared by him. And his roommate takes the air conditioner little dial, and it goes from 1 to 9, as far as 9 being the highest intensity and 1 being the lowest. And this roommate just kind of flips from 3 to 4 to see that his input has an output. And he's thoroughly entertained by it. The roommate is, as he's just turning the dials and sees that, when he cranks it up to 9, the air conditioner really blasts at him. And, I think it's a recurring theme that when you are addicted and you have your own issues through detox, that you tend to think of other people who are in the exact same position as you as being somehow different. And so he doesn't see himself, Tiny Yule doesn't see himself as bad as a detox circumstance as the roommate. Because he's like, that's so crazy to be turning the dials and just entertained by the air conditioner. But the roommate could be thinking the same thing, which is, hey, I'm turning the air conditioner, but that guy thinks mice comes out of electrical outlets. So it's a little bit of a idea we'll get into, I think, with some Alcoholic Anonymous ideology. And then we go into the last section of this chapter, which is we're back at the Near Eastern Medical Attaché. It's mid-afternoon now of April the 2nd. The last time we checked up on them, it was 1:45 a.m. So now there's a whole mess at the house. So not only is the Near Eastern Medical Attaché there, the wife is there, the Saudi prince, who the Near Eastern Medical Attaché attends to, had sent his personal assistant down there to the house to check on the Near Eastern medical attaché. And then after he didn't come back, the Saudi prince also sent 2 armed guards. And also, because the front door was open and there were lots of people inside, some Seventh-day Adventists found their way in. And this whole spectacle of people are all watching the TP viewer. And, you know, they're not displeased at all, though the room is smelling poorly, as is mentioned. But it's safe to say at this point, I think we can let the cat out of the bag and say, whatever this cartridge is that was shipped in the mail is fatally entertaining, right? So, you know, you watch it and you cannot stop watching it, which is kind of something that you can just stumble across and become addicted to without any input from you. So next we'll start to unravel some of the more global implications of this cartridge in the next video. Thanks.